What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Dreams to Reality podcast. And today we've got a very, very special guest. And this is somebody I've actually been following for quite a while now. Actually, after listening to him on another podcast. Believe it or not, even though we got this podcast, I don't listen to many other people's, but it was actually Ben Coomer's podcast. And something really took me back when listening to this podcast. I'm going to go into it today into a lot more detail. But as you can already see, we are not in a studio back in Bristol. We are here in a home gym of my guest today. And to be honest, looking at his house, looking at this home gym is something what I actually aspire to be and grow and build, especially for my family one day. So with that said, let's not waste any time. Dr. Cameron Nichol, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, mate. First of all, congratulations on having a fantastic name.
I know, I was literally going to say, you've literally got the best name in the whole wide world. So, there's so many things I want to cover, right?
Okay.
Because you are, whether you like the word or not, an entrepreneur, you're an athlete, and you're also a doctor, right?
Yep. Heavily
Heavily involved in medicine.
Well, that's by definition. Yeah. So I'm a fully qualified medical doctor, working in hospitals full time at the moment,
Wow.
and heading into a career in probably general practice. As you mentioned, yes, I'm an athlete, so former Olympic rower. So I spent 6 years rowing for Great Britain, 4 of which in the national team, and finished off that sort of adventure with the London 2012 Olympics. And I now sort of balance my time between my sort of fitness venture, which is RowingWOD, my medical work day to day, my family, which has become a bigger part of my life since having my son 18 months ago. And then I sort of reserve about 5 to 10% of my time for what I just call exciting opportunities. So
Like this,
mate. You joke, but it's true. So, I mean, obviously just nice people doing nice things I have time for. So that's why this come out.
The first thing what strikes me when you're saying all of that is balance. How do you... Actually, let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think there's going to be so many things I can personally take away.
Right.
And hopefully everybody at home as well. So where did it all start for you? You talked about being an athlete,
Well, I was
being a rower.
Yeah. I suppose the biggest kind of pivot in my life, or the biggest kind of event in my life that changed the way I was thinking about things was being introduced into rowing. So I worked pretty hard at school and got into medical school at University College London in London.
Wow.
And that was a big goal for me. That was my top choice medical school. Really wanted to get there.
Where are you originally from?
So I've travelled around the world. So Dad's job, I was over in Dubai, and I was over in Asia as a youngster. Okay. So I spent some years in Japan. To speak a bit of Japanese, Skoshi Nihongo shaberu. I
agree.
Yeah, it might be nothing. But then I got to medical school, having spent sort of my adolescent years in Somerset, and grew up there. But within the first year at medical school, I was kind of a bit thirsty for sport, and I needed to kind of get moving because I was spending.
How old was you at this point?
So I was 18. I got to medical school at 18, and it was an intense program. So you're in, lectures just before 9, and it's kind of back to back to back. It's almost like a 9 to 5 job. Intense exams, intense study, very, very competitive because you get ranked. Not necessarily on how well you're doing, you get ranked compared to your peers. So you've got 350, 400 people in a year group, and your sort of decile, the top 10%, the bottom 10%, that matters. So even within that quite, intelligent, hardworking group of people, you've still got to be kind of the best of the best to get good jobs at the end of it. So that was as an 18-year-old, quite a difficult experience.
So was that quite competitive? Did you feel
massively?
Was it like what was the environment and the culture like? Was it a supportive culture, or was it everybody is out for themselves?
No, it was very much supportive.
Okay.
So everyone is, I think as a medic, you're slightly of a different mindset to people who are doing other degrees in university. And the reason I say that is because your traditional degree that's maybe 3 or 4 years long, just a little bit shorter, and it's a little bit more hands-off. So some of my colleagues that were, in the arts, for instance, they had sort of 8 or 9 hours a week of touch time with their professors. Obviously, the sciences is much more time intensive. You've got to be in labs and things like that, but there's less potential reading and not having reading all these novels in the background. But with medicine, you're there for sort of 5-6 years. So my course was 6 years. 5 years of medicine and an extra year to do another degree on top of it. So you sort of know you're there
Wow.
for the long haul. And you know that you're all kind of going into the same profession. Whereas, if you study maths at university, you may not all go on to do the same career. So there's a little bit of a kind of sisterhood, brotherhood, I guess, that takes place where it's quite cliquey. And so I think from the outside looking in at university, that's probably what people see is that, medics keep themselves to themselves. Yeah. And then there's the sort of rest of the university. And the reason I mention that is it's relevant. So when I started rowing, I loved being on the River Thames in sort of the heart of London and in West London, boat race course. And I just loved being outside. And I started at medical school, which was quite a cliquey boat club, and sort of went through the ranks quite quickly there. And it ended up being in the University of London boat club, and that's where things for me took a big detour. And everyone told me you can't do rowing and medicine. It's just impossible.
Because how many hours do you think you was dedicating towards studying a week then?
Well, you've got 9 to 5, 5 days a week. So what's that?
Legitimately 9 to 5.
So
because,
that's
for example, I've been to uni.
Yeah.
I've done a business course.
Yeah.
So you might be in lessons or 16 hours a week, but then you can do whatever you want with the rest of your time if you want to.
Yeah.
But you have to be. Is it kind of?
It's quite for me. It was quite strict. So there's regular exams. So I think we had every 4 to 8 weeks, there was some sort of either formative or summative exams. So 8 times 5 is 40. Take out a lunch break. That's 35 hours a week of lectures, and you're roughly expected to kind of put that amount of time in away.
Yeah.
So I guess you could pluck a number out of thin air and say that's 70 hours a week of studying. Obviously, those that pick up facts a bit quicker. I just got one of those brains I can retain weird facts, which has kind of helped me. You can maybe dial that down. But I think for me, the first couple of years at university were all about learning how to learn. And I was much better at doing that when I got into really juggling Olympic rowing training and medical exams. I was very good at knowing how I learned and knowing how I could get the most out of myself.
That's fast. So how do you learn? What did you discover in those first kind of 2 years? So, for example, when I went into uni, it's kind of the first in my family to do it. I'm also heavily dyslexic, ADD.
Yeah.
So I only discovered that in my first year at university because I kind of went into my first lecture and I was like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I was actually, you got the ball over there, but I was playing American football, did a bit for GB and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I thought I've had too many hits in my head in American football. Am I getting stupid? But the fact was I was just struggling how to understand how I process the information. For me, I wouldn't say my spelling's particularly bad. It's the way I process information and how long it takes to process it and the way I understand it. That is my biggest challenge. Everyone's got their own challenges. But what did you learn about your kind of learning style within the first year or two?
Good question. Well, first of all, the thing I'd say to that is I think that is fundamental or a fundamental issue that we have in our education system today. I think I was fortunate in that the way I learn happens to be congruent to the way we test and examine people. So I learn I don't like being wrong. So if I do loads and loads of questions and tests and I get tested and tested and tested, that's actually quite good for me because I'm like, I'm not good at that. Okay. I can get better at it. But that's not good for everyone.
Is that a genetic thing? What
I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit of nature and nurture. I like knowing the answers to things. I like problem solving. I got you. So even before this podcast, we were just talking about random different things, and even just hearing a problem, I'm trying to find a solution to it.
And just so everybody knows, before we had the cameras rolling, obviously I reached out to you. You don't know too much about what I do, so you asked me. So I said, this is what I do in schools. This is my main focus. This is the main program we're trying to push. This is what we're trying to make money from. And you're like, okay, but what about this? Have you tried this? What about that? I guess you're going to have these type of challenges. You can combat straight away. I can see you're thinking. And even if it's ideas I've thought about, you think about it in a complete different way as well.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily right. It's just what works for me. And I guess I'll always be suited to that type of career, that type of mind. So I think that's why startup and creating new things is quite exciting for me. I think it's why I'm good at medicine and why I've chosen that as a career path. I like numbers, so things like business, I can make it work. But it's really interesting what you touched on about your story, and I think that's something that we need to, as a society, get much better. It's that kind of phrase that I'm going to completely screw up, but it's when Einstein said if you were to measure a fish by how high it could jump, it would think it was stupid all its life.
Something like that. Isn't it? If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life
thinking it was stupid. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what's really wrong at the moment with the education system, is that we're trying to conform everyone into this very, I mean, there's a lovely TED talk, I think Sir Ken Robinson, where he says, if anyone is listening, watch that, Sir Ken Robinson, I'm pretty sure I got the name right, on creativity. And he said that what we're trying to do in this education system is effectively produce university professors. We test people from like 5 and upwards, and then all of a sudden we get more and more academic focused, and people come out the end of it knowing all these facts, but actually, is it suited to the real world? Probably not. And I think now more than ever, I mean, you're an example, is that you can create and start something that you really believe in, and if it adds value and you're able to capture that value, that's a business, that's a living, and you can do positive changes in the world.
And it comes down to that conversation even kind of around university. And as I said from the beginning, we don't have no structure for today, but I think it's important because is university for everybody? Some schools, some places, some organizations really push it. And I think there is a lot of value in university, more so obviously if you're becoming a doctor or a lawyer or something. But when I was on a business course with probably 300 other people.
Yeah.
And a lot of them was just there because they wanted to be, they didn't know anything else they wanted to do. And everybody, literally probably everyone had the goal to just go and work for somebody else.
Yeah.
I was the only one person who had the goal of saying, listen, when I graduate, I'm working for myself, man.
Yeah.
So I used that time at uni to really build something before I left. And it's just trying to understand how we all operate and not just trying to follow the rat race. Is that the...
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to phrase it. I would say, to your point, is university right for everyone? I would say no, but I would caveat that very quickly with, I think that higher education is right for everyone. And let me caveat that statement as well, which is that we need to continue to learn as human beings, right? And higher education has almost been tethered to the concept of university, and I think it needs to be separated, where once you come through school, you don't stop learning. If you want to be a carpenter or a mechanic, or if you want to start your own online business, or if you want to be a speaker, you still have to learn the tools of your trade, and you have to continue to learn as an individual, because it makes us fulfilled as human beings, but it also allows us to contribute more to society, and we just raise the bar of what's acceptable.
So why doesn't that happen?
Well, that's a really big question, isn't it? I think the first thing I can think of is money. So with all these things, there needs to be a value exchange. It's quite an easy thing to say, I'll pay some money and I'll go to university, happy days. But like we were having this discussion beforehand, university is a very set criteria. There's a degree, there's something tangible there. There's a product that you can pay for, that you can then get. You can put a stamp on your name, you can get a degree certificate, and it has a tangible value that's already recognized because of the years that have gone before it. Yeah. And there's that relationship there. How do you do that with a speaker that speaks a message, has a fantastic voice and fantastic message to speak, and continues to learn their trade? It's quite difficult from where we are now to be able to deliver that. And actually, just using the same example of Sir Ken Robinson's talk, he talks about a girl that was fidgeting, and so I think she was 7 or 8 years old, and parents brought her in and said, I don't really know what's going on. She's fidgeting, and the teacher was like, she's fidgeting. And then they brought her to this one teacher, and they said, well, let's just pop her in the room. And they just played some music, and they walked down to the room, and they were sort of looking through the glass as she was inside, and she just got up and started dancing. And so this teacher said, well, it's quite obvious your daughter's a dancer. And that young girl actually then went on to become a music producer, a fantastic dancer, and I think she was one of the artistic directors of Cats, and she's a multimillionaire. Wow! It's like, but if you'd have taken that girl into some other circles, Sir Ken Robinson says, well, we'd have medicated her and told her to do some more math. And that's the kind of, I think, paradigm shift that needs to change at quite a large level for us to produce human beings that are contributing to their own kind of true calling and makes them feel most valued in the world.
And what's the worst about this situation is majority of teachers agree with you.
The majority of teachers agree. Well, I don't know many teachers. I've got friends that are teachers.
I know, obviously, every day I come, but they're following their job. They're doing what they're told to do, whether they agree with it or not. So it's like, a lot needs to be done. We could probably talk about it for hours and hours and hours. So back to you. No, it's fine. Back to your uni and learning how you worked. Yeah. How was that whole process? The first couple of years in uni. Have you started rowing at this point?
Yeah, so I started rowing a month into university. I was
first month.
So like all things, I went to the Freshers Fair and just tested different things out. So I went and played a bit of basketball, which is what I did before rowing. I really loved that. Did different sorts of clubs and societies. And then I went down to the river. It was like, oh, free barbecue. I was like, oh, great, I'll go. And then like,
free food.
Happy
I'm
days.
starving.
And I was like, do I have to wear one of those like dodgy lycra? And they're like, no, don't worry. Just come in like gym shorts, it'll be fine. I was like, fine. And I love just being out on the water and that kind of like calm, tranquil, just feeling the boat together, being outside. I absolutely loved it.
So you've never been interested in rowing before?
I'd seen it as I think an 17, 18-year-old. So I'd seen it as a thing that some people do at university. Because I didn't row at school, and there was very few schools I knew that rowed. And obviously these boats are quite expensive. It's quite inaccessible for a lot of people. And so I started doing that and absolutely loved it. Two or so months after that, I did a fitness test on the rowing machine, which was my kind of first real experience with the rowing machine. And it was quite good. It was quite fast.
Was you relatively fit up to this point? Did you exercise? Did you?
Yeah. Well, so I did a lot of sport as a kid.
So basketball. And
I did. As a youngster, I did ice hockey, basketball, baseball, football, rugby, cricket. Then later on, in sort of adolescent years, basketball was the sport I loved. I still sort of do. You can see some basketballs on the wall. And so, I just loved that.
Who was that basketball signed by?
Do you know basketball?
A little bit.
So that's Magic Johnson and Larry Bird.
I know Magic Johnson and Larry Bird.
Yeah, it's from the 80s. So they were dueling it out as I was like a 1 or 2 year old. So I think as a 10-year-old, my era was the kind of Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls, Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Supersonics, and so I went back and sort of watched all the archive videos from as a sort of 10-year-old. So
Magic Johnson, wow, he's a huge success now as well, not just from his basketball.
Yeah, well, he's a business magnate as well. So he's been very successful in his life.
I can't remember. I researched his net worth as you do, whether it's accurate or not. I watched the interview and he's like 500 million or something.
But he's a fantastic example of he was a Laker in LA and had that journey as an athlete, and then just felt a real sense of obligation to give back to the club. So I think until very recently, actually, until I think the Lakers didn't make the playoffs last year, I think that's when he stepped down as head of the organization.
Oh, so he's still a part of the organization?
I don't think he is now.
Okay.
And hardcore basketball fans will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that he was still up until last year the head of the organization. So that's a real example to me of people that are doing things for the right reasons and giving back for the right reasons. Anyway, tangent. We were talking about rowing. I got a bit faster at that, and was in the University of London team. And then about 8 months after starting, I was in the top university boat, which was kind of cool. And then
is that good?
That's really good.
Okay.
I went to Henley Regatta and got to the final, which is kind of a big deal. Lost, which sucked. But then the year after I went back and so won Henley and then won my first sort of under 23 Great Britain vest. And then the year after that, just timing worked out for me.
So can you educate me a little bit on
rowing?
Sure. Are you rowing by yourself or are you rowing with a team?
So rowing has a few different boats. So rowing, as the name rowing, is one oar per person. So you got like a one long stick and that's your oar. There's another specialty which sometimes people refer to as rowing, which you probably will think about it as rowing, which is an oar in each hand.
Okay, I got you.
That's actually called sculling, so SCU.
That's the one I think I've seen,
Yeah, and that's what people think about as rowing. And it kind of is. It's, the umbrella is rowing, but it's rowing and sculling are the two disciplines.
Is there like a bit of beef between the two?
Yeah, there is. There's a little bit of beef. It's like, it's like rowers versus scullers, Scullers are also, everyone said, well, the rowers say it was a bit crazier.
What's actually harder?
So I found sculling more technically difficult. I was always a better rower in a boat, like in pairs, fours and eights, than a sculler. And then, so both of those disciplines have 3 Olympic events each. Okay. So the smallest boat you can be in is a sculler, is 1 by yourself. Yeah. And then the biggest one is 4. So there's like 4 of you with 2 oars each. So it goes single, then double, then quad. So there's 3 boats. And as a rower, obviously 2 oars. So you've got to have 1 person per oar. So it's a pair, that's the smallest boat, and it goes pair, 4, and then the blue ribbon then is the 8. And the 8 is the boat that I loved the most. I still do. It's just so fast. It's wicked.
How fast?
So it'll make your coaches, if they're cycling, very out of breath. If they're cycling next to them, they'll do 2K in 5 minutes and 18 seconds. In fact, I think the gold medal time's now 5:17. But yeah, so 5 minutes and 20 seconds to do 2K. It's pretty quick. Sort of 120 place. If you've ever been on the rowing machine, 120.
Do you know what? Rowing is one of those exercises, right? You always talk about even like triathlons and stuff like that. I reckon they should chuck the rowing there, because going on the rowing machine just in the gym.
Yeah.
I don't do much rowing, but doing like little interventions, kind of sprints.
Yeah.
Oh my word.
Yeah, it's difficult. Well, for me, the kind of little mantra I say is that people grow up running and grow up cycling, but they don't grow up rowing.
It's true.
And the reason for that is it's become a bit of a foreign movement. So for sort of thousands of years, it was a part of locomotion. We used to go down the river and row, right? But it is quite counterintuitive, just the way the boat's set up and physics, where you're essentially connecting your hands to your feet, but you need to use your entire body to help kind of lever the boat past the oars, and that's quite an important thing. Everyone thinks it's moving water and like trying to make the oars go fast, but actually all you're doing is putting the oars in the water and really kind of making sure that's nice and firm and solid, and then you're actually pushing yourself and pushing the boat past the point in which you've anchored into the water.
There's a deep metaphor there.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Not flailing around, just doing good solid work, deep work. But yeah, so because it's such a foreign movement, if you're not used to it, it can make you tired very quickly. But therein lies the real fun and the challenge, because it's quite simple. Like we could just jump on that machine now and show you a few things, and like you go much faster quite quickly. So easy to learn. But then it's really, really difficult to master. To get really good at it, it requires, hours, weeks, years of dedication.
Playing completely ignorant.
Go for it.
Is there a talent for it?
Yes, but compared to sports like tennis, football, etc., it's slightly different. So the skill set for those sports like tennis, football, etc., highly skill-based. So just because you could run the 100 meters or do an assault course very quickly, obstacles, like SAQ stuff, doesn't mean you're going to be a great footballer, right? You could run around the pitch, but if you can't kick the ball, you can't land it on Cristiano Ronaldo's head, you're not going to get picked. Whereas if you've got a 5 minute and 42K time and you're 6.5 feet tall, pretty confident we can make you into an Olympic rower. As long
no
as,
luck.
That's
my dream goal.
Yeah, so rowing is like swimming, like triathlon, is quite a high physiologically demanding sport. So think about it a little bit like race car driving. Lewis Hamilton is never going to be winning the Formula One if you give him a sort of Ford Fiesta. It's just not going to happen, right? No matter how good he is at picking the lines and hitting the apex, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's true.
So you first need to build a car that's fast enough to be able to compete. And then once you've got a car that's fast enough, then you need to be able to drive it. So that's the kind of distinction I make.
Okay, let's go back. Back
mate.
to rowing. First couple of years, things are starting to go well with rowing.
Yeah.
Rowing's going great.
Yeah.
How's your studying going?
It's okay at the moment. So
just okay.
Yeah. So I'm someone that likes to be really good at what I do. I was sort of in the middle of the pack, so to speak. So in terms of like the decile ranking that I talked about, I wasn't top, I wasn't bottom, I was just sort of in the middle.
Just say you took rowing out the picture.
Yeah.
Would you have been at the top?
I mean, it's difficult to say.
But do you think you would have been?
I mean, knowing me, that's where I would have wanted to be.
Okay,
yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. So that's where things were. I did my first 3 years of studying full time, and then I did my first 3 years of rowing full time. So that was really, really difficult. Stupid stories like waking up as you do, waking up at 5, getting the first train from Warren Street Station at 5:35, out to, do my first rowing session, back for lectures, and then repeating that journey afterwards. So finishing 5 o'clock, out to the boathouse, doing a session, coming back home. It was just stupid.
Where did that drive come from, though?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
That's not easy.
No, and
especially for doing it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Well,
that level of consistency.
Yeah.
To continue to do that. Obviously, we can talk about habits, and it probably became a part of just what you do. But where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, great question. We can go kind of deep with this, I guess. But so my parents are really hard workers. My mum and dad both have, they've worked incredibly hard and still continue to do so. So I think that's probably an example that I've always been shown. All my family are pretty what I call grafters. So my uncles, aunts, like grandparents, they've all just like kind of knuckled down and just kind of got on with things. So I think that's been shown to me from a young age. But I also probably had some early wins as a youngster. So my parents were also quite good at celebrating success. So whenever I did something well as a kid that I worked hard on, they were like, great, that's amazing, well done, that's fantastic. And they'd always almost try and reward effort. So even if I'd done something well, but I hadn't really tried that hard, they weren't that bothered. Whereas if I'd tried really hard at something, and no matter what the outcome, they'd kind of reward that. So for me, it was almost, I guess, subconsciously that effort was something that I was always being rewarded for. And that's what I found in my life, is that the things that I try hardest at, that I want the most, they tend to be the more successful ones. So there's probably at some level that. And I think I've always, looking back on kind of adolescent years, I've had good heroes. So I've chosen my heroes well. So the basketball players that used to, play on the big stage, I never used to kind of pick the people who were driving around in Lamborghinis that were kind of, shooting the winning shot now and again. I would always sort of take comfort from the people,
the legacy.
Well, not so much the legacy as the kind of the hard workers. So, like everyone talks about Michael Jordan as like this amazing guy. And, he's arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But like the amount of work that he put in to get him there.
You're not going to say anything controversial now, are you?
Am I? What?
About the greatest of all time?
Well, I mean, in my mind, it's him and LeBron James without a shadow of a doubt, as the two people there. And you can talk about rings and stats and all that. But
so
anyway,
is that effort?
For me, for me, there's no way round that effort. So to get the things that are shiny, I think, in life, I mean, you can get lucky. You can win the lottery. You might go on a reality TV show and like whatever and make some money. You might, I don't know. But they're the outliers, as Malcolm Gladwell will say, right? They're the kind of like 1% of the 1%. For most people, if you work hard and if you work smart and you continuously, Kaizen, if you continuously learn and get better at what you do, it's pretty hard to continuously fail for your entire life. Yeah. It's normally an upward spiral in my experience. And doesn't mean to say you're never going to be exposed to failure. Roger Federer. That
could look like anything though, couldn't it? Failure, obstacles could kind of look like anything, I guess.
And there's a lovely story that I like to kind of like remind myself of sometimes. So Simon Sinek is one of these motivational speakers.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff. Leaders eat
last. I don't know if that's his. Is that his?
Yeah, it is.
But start with why.
Let me ask you a quick question, sorry, before we do that. Yeah. Do leaders eat first or do leaders eat last? So we've had this debate quite a few times on different channels, or even at my talks, working with adults. I've done some stuff with like midwives and stuff. Yeah. Do leaders eat first or do they eat last?
I mean, I think they can do both, right? I mean, it completely depends. If you're think of it in a different way. If you're a shepherd leading a flock, I mean, you can lead up a kind of alpine path that's quite wiggly and quite dangerous. You can easily sort of set the pace and set the path, and then people can follow you. Or if you're out in a field and you want to roughly go there, you can easily be the shepherd at the back, kind of just steering sheep. And so I don't think it has to be an absolute rule. But what I was going to say was that, so the consistent theme I've seen, I've been very, very fortunate to be around, high performers in different places. Most of that from my athletic career. But one of the things I've listened to is Roger Federer saying that there's no way around hard work. You just have to embrace it. And working, under the kind of the wings of Jürgen Grobler, who's the head coach of the rowing team. So I was there for 4 years. He used to have this phrase, which was like, "There are no shortcuts." He's East German, and it's true. Like there might be shortcuts that you may win the lottery. You may, as I said, like get on a reality TV. You may just get a lucky break and. Fantastic. That may happen, but it probably won't. In just the law of averages, it probably won't. So you have to embrace, and I won't call it hard work. I call it smart work because I think there's another flip side where I think there's a lot of this kind of like hustle nature at the moment, which is just 24/7, don't sleep.
Nothing. Like my nan was a cleaner her whole life, and she was a very, very hard working cleaner. But was she necessarily working smart? There's a difference, what you're working towards, what direction you're trying to go for. Well, obviously, she was trying to produce for her family and stuff like that, so complete different responsibilities and complete different mind frame. But you got some hard workers out there who are not doing or not multi-millionaires and stuff. But
also, I mean, I don't know if that is even the goal to be, everyone needs to be a multi-millionaire. And I think screw you to the person that says that people who are working really hard to provide for their family are like less than those that are working smart and creating like loads of wealth. It's like, well, no, screw you. Like, that's shit. I mean, just because you've got lucky or because you happen to have a skill set that's suited to having more financial gain, that doesn't make you a better person.
So what is a problem with the hustle mentality then?
So
because that was me. So actually, let me break it down to you. So when I first started doing this, I said a little bit at the beginning, being a motivational speaker, 7 years ago, I was trying to have that kind of image of 25/8, the grind don't stop, work. And actually now I look back on it, it's just bullshit. And I was lying to myself because I was lying to everyone, and I wasn't actually working that hard, and I definitely wasn't working very smart.
Right.
It was all kind of egotistical driven, and it was false. It wasn't it wasn't reality.
And I think that, so there's a few things to dissect there. The first is that I get really pissed off with people that say what they're not doing. So the first thing
that was me at one point.
Yeah, and I think I've probably been guilty of it in the past as well. You know, it's that people that are trying to teach people how to be something, but they've got no experience of being that themselves. It's like, what an absolute lie, what an absolute fallacy to sort of putting yourself out there saying, oh, this is how you run a multi-million pound business. And like, well, how many multi-million pound businesses have you run? None. Well, how on earth have you got any experience? How on earth can you be teaching these people, right? So that's kind of the first thing that I'd like dissect out of that. Remind me of what you said about 30 seconds ago. I've just kind of lost my the second thing that I was going to dissect out of it. You're talking about
hustle, lying.
Oh, that was it.
Media,
hustle, yeah. So the second thing that I kind of get frustrated with is that people are not looking at this with a kind of wider lens. So I think it's really easy and it's almost comforting to say, I'm going to hustle hard and I'm going to just work all hours of the day. It's almost there's a sense of comfort in that, you know, you're kind of trying to do your best and you're just kind of working hard. And I think that hustle culture has come from a place of people thinking that young people or, you know, young professionals are not working hard. They're just out pissing around doing nothing. And so I feel like that's where that kind of hustle message has come from. Like, you've just got to change your stars. You've just got to be working really hard.
Bullshit though.
But my feeling is that in pursuing that 24/7, 365, what's the cost to that? You know, we're seeing more and more an increasing rise in the prevalence of mental health pathology. We're seeing more and more rise. You know, it's Movember this month. You know, male cancers. You know, whatever, prostate cancer and all that kind of is one of the big focuses of November, but also male suicide. You know, that's one of the huge things that we're seeing, is that, you know, people are ending their own lives. And I can't help but think, I have no objective evidence to demonstrate this off the top of my head, but I can't help but think that this sort of work all hours of the day until you're absolutely exhausted is not a healthy message for young kids. I think that absolutely work smart and, you know, pursue your dreams and work hard for those dreams, but also understand that you need to be able to sleep, you need to be able to nourish your body, you need to be able to move. We are human beings that are meant to be around other human beings in cultures, in sort of small tribes. That's really, really important. And so I get frustrated and almost tired with the message of let's just grind away, because my kind of big message is, well, what's the cost to that?
So let me ask you, right?
Yeah.
I talk to 100,000 young people a year.
Do you really? Wow.
A year.
That's amazing.
To be fair, we're probably shortening that now because I told you before we're trying to add a lot more value, so we're trying to limit that. What do I need to do? Like what you just said then, to make sure that I do not come across as work hard. Obviously, this is a Dreams to Reality podcast.
Yeah.
Go after your goals, go after your dreams. What other elements do I need to be reinforcing? What do I need to be sharing? So yesterday, me and Enzo was in, where was we yesterday? Reading? Yeah, in a school in Reading, and we had a group of year 9 girls. And these year 9 girls were high performers. But the level of anxiety, the level of stress they're already experiencing, they're not even doing their GCSEs yet. They feel pressure from the schools. The expectations is all 9, so that's like A stars. Pressure from home, and you can see them. And actually, our advice yesterday, I went on a mental health first aid course and learned a bit about like stress tanks and things like that. And I broke it down for them and said, God, you need to start to enjoy yourself a little bit more. Yeah. Because they're all there and they're like giving back to me, but you can just see they're so like tense. They're so like, I don't know, it's hard to explain.
So I think the first flag to plant is, I think being honest is quite important. So exactly as you said, just giving your story and telling what you're trying to do. You know, we spoke about it before starting recording, and I think what you're doing is amazing. That's a really honest, good. It's a good. No, honestly, mate, and take the compliment, because it's a good message, and I think it's a good product, and it's a good service that you're giving out to young kids that I think need it. So I think that's a great thing, and I don't think anyone will ever be able to kind of come back to you with that and be like, oh, you know, what have you done? It's like, well, what I'm doing now is a fantastic thing, and I'm very confident in continuing this journey. I will get to a really good place.
But it's quickly, before you go on to your next point, it's about that learning and the growth. So I feel like I'm always learning and growing, because if I didn't, I would still be giving out a message of work hard, work hard, work hard. Yeah. But because I'm learning and growing, and like you said,
and therefore I think that message to me is much stronger, because, you know, and you're doing a great thing when you're recording that journey. So, you know, in 2, 3, 5 years from now, the message will just be deeper and much more robust, because people won't be able to kind of rebut that. They'll be like, oh, what are you talking about, Cam? You're like, well, this is what I've done, this is what I've recorded, this is what I've learned, and this is actually what I feel, and this is what I want to kind of give back to the kind of community. So I think that definitely you should be honest, and I think that people can trivialize anything, right? You can say, oh, you know, basketball's just popping a ball in a hoop, and, you know, rowing just making boats go fast. You can
people are like, you get paid for how much just to talk?
No, but you can trivialize anything, and, you know, that's not why we're here. Another thing you can flip back to your year 9 girls is that, you know, the Earth is the universe is billions of years old. We're this sort of third rock from the sun. We haven't been around for that long in the grand scheme of things. You're not going to be around that long, you know, whether it's the next 60, 70, 80, 90 years. It's really a tiny little snippet on this kind of mortal coil. So why do something that you really don't feel either fulfilled or you enjoy or you get some sort of satisfaction out of it? It doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, hard work for the sake of hard work or hard work to please someone else. You know, that Steve Jobs phrase of like, don't live your life living someone else's dreams and beliefs. I just think it really resonates with me.
His Harvard speech was amazing. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, of course. And that's the thing, you know, the 3 stories, you know, don't live a life by dogma, or trapped in dogma, or whatever it is. And I think that's an important message. I mean, it's all quite academic, isn't it, talking about these things? And for me, like, the biggest evidence is what someone does. And so I think that people listening to this will need to just do this, and they'll need to go out and practice it, because you can talk about it all day until you're blue in the face. But, you know, I'm a big believer in kind of you are what you do, and you are by the results that you get. And so I think that those 2 things are really honest. Like, be honest. Well, maybe 3. Be honest. Have fun, and just realize that life is quite precious, right? It's a privilege to be alive. The old Alan Watts saying of, you know, people think about, you know, go to school and then university and then go to a job and then you go up the corporate ladder and then you go, and before you know it, you're dead. It's like, well, what if life was actually like a piece of music, and, you know, you're not trying to get to the end of Mozart's Requiem. You're trying to dance along the way. Requiem's not a thing you should dance to, by the way. But anyway, it's a sort of death march. But you know, you kind of get what I'm trying to say, which is that we're here to kind of enjoy ourselves, contribute to the world, put value out into the world, and if you can capture a bit of that value, that means you can earn a living. You know.
Quick question.
Yeah.
We'll come back onto your story. That's what we do all the time.
Great.
I don't want to just reel off your story and then just go from there. You mentioned about somebody, say, teaching somebody how to grow £1 million business without actually doing it themselves. I agree. For example, if I have a personal trainer, I, for some reason, would want somebody, whether it's not just bro science, but somebody who's qualified, but also living that life to coach me, than somebody who's, whether I'm right or wrong, or somebody who's, say, overweight and they might be qualified and they're teaching me. Whether that's right or wrong, that's just how I would portray it. But then, actually, break down that.
I'm basically trying to say that I don't think you have to be an Olympic gold medalist to coach Olympic gold medalists. Yep. I don't think that you need to be an owner of a multi-million pound business to teach people how to run multi-million pound businesses. And I don't think you need to be like not overweight to be a personal trainer. I think that you do need to have relevant experience to be able to coach people into doing something that they want to do.
I think so.
So what I'm trying to say is that I really get sick of seeing people, mainly on social media, that are coaching or trying to help people where they have no first-hand experience or very little first-hand experience themselves. They haven't done those things themselves, and they don't really have any experience with anyone that's done those things themselves. but they've sort of self-justified it because they've got a message that sounds good and they've got traction with some, followers. That's what I get really frustrated
And that's
with.
the difference. That's why I'm working in schools at the moment and not corporates. I do a little bit of corporate, but I mainly do schools because that's the market I relate to.
Yeah.
And just to back up your point and why I completely agree with you, who's the New England Patriots head coach?
Well, I know Bill Belichick has left. Is he leaving?
Has he left?
Is he still there?
I think he's still there.
Oh, fine, he's been
how
for
many
ages.
Super Bowls does he have? 5, 6, 7?
Is it 6 or 7? Yeah.
A huge amount.
6, yeah.
Does he look like he could play American football in the NFL?
Well, yeah, no. Well, probably. He might have done as a youngster. I don't know his life story.
But does that make sense? But he's one of the most successful coaches ever.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
even though he's not a quarterback or can't be a running back, doesn't mean that he can't coach or train. But then I think the validation and the experience he's gained throughout the way justifies him to be in that position as the coach.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm basically saying is you can't go from watching American football. Well, I don't think. Anyway, you could probably go from watching American football on the sidelines to then the Patriots when Bill leaves going, hey, guy sitting on the sofa or lady sitting on the sofa, like, do you want to come and lead our 6-time Super Bowl winning team? It's just not going to happen.
No, it's not.
So, I mean, but that doesn't mean you can't go and start coaching football somewhere and learn your trade and get better at it. And absolutely, you may be coaching
I know loads of, well, not loads, but I know a few English coaches over in America now because they started coaching over here.
Yeah,
then they went to like a Division 3 in America, started coaching there, and then they slowly D2, D1.
Yeah.
And it's snowballed from there.
And then you're away.
So bring it back to uni. You're 2021.
I think 2021, I've probably been invited into the Olympic squad. So my journey kind of really took up another notch when I was going into clinical medicine, so basically into hospital and doing all that kind of, learning how to be a doctor as well as doing all the study in the human body. And at the same time, Beijing had just finished and quite a lot of people retired.
When was Beijing?
Beijing was 2008,
yeah.
So what tends to happen in Olympic sports, unlike kind of football where every year like some people retire, so there's quite a steady sort of efflux and influx of footballers. In Olympic sports, maybe similar to rugby, but not quite the same. Every 4 years, there's a kind of mass efflux. So people are like, I'm going to retire. I don't really want to commit for another 4 years because you've got to sort of sign up to
so
4-year
drop
chunks.
Off, essentially.
Well, you don't have to, but that's what is seen. People go, well, I'm not going to do London, so I might as well hang up my oar now. So there was about 10 guys. Obviously, a heavyweight men's team was where I was trying to get to. 10 guys, I think, probably retired. And I was sort of a young chap kind of working his way through the ranks. And Jürgen said, he was willing to give me a chance. And
was it a phone call? What was it? Did you see it come in? Like how?
So it was a bit more gradual. So I'd already won an under-23 World Championship medal, which was cool.
Where was that?
So I won that over in actually Strathclyde in 2007, and then did the under-23 World Champs in Brandenburg in Germany. And so, I mean, that's a kind of a story I haven't spoken about more. But so I fractured my rib in between the semi-final and the final in the World Championships.
How?
Rowing, just pulling really hard.
Wow.
So I fractured my rib.
Was it in the race?
Yeah, so it got a little bit worse in the heat. I just felt something go in the heat. And so I normally row on bow side, which is where the oar's going to your sort of left, like that. And for this year, I just switched to the other side. So my body was not quite used to it. Obviously, I'd only done it for a couple of years. Just wasn't quite used to it. And it was quite choppy in the heat, so like lots of waves and stuff. And I was working really hard, trying to get through, obviously, to the semi-finals. I just felt something kind of go around my kind of, so medics or people that like sort of T10 to T11 or T9 to T11, so like sort of mid-thoracic. I just felt it really kind of twinged. I couldn't shake it. And then I was breathing and it was painful and I was like, this isn't great. So obviously saw the physios, dosed up on some painkillers, some anti-inflammatories, and then we sort of made the call, well, we need to do the semi-final because if we don't get through that, it's just sort of this boat that arrived and didn't do anything. So I sort of got strapped up, did the semi-final, we made the final, which was great, but I was in like excruciating pain and I was quite worried. Obviously, being a medic, you start to go through the worst things that can happen. Like, have I given myself a pneumothorax, like air in between the chest cavity and the lung? There's a guy called Alex Partridge in 2004 that had that. Have I done something really bad? I just couldn't breathe, I couldn't sleep. And so we made the sad, unfortunate decision that, it wasn't just me, I was there with 3 other guys. if I was there in the final, you know, at sort of 50% capacity, like we're going to come last, right? Because I mean, the races are won and lost by small little bits. And so I got pulled for the final because I was injured, and the guys ended up coming sixth anyway with a sub. So because there was a new person in the boat, and obviously you're racing the best in the world, even though it's like you're not quite, you're sort of in the race, you're not going to beat other countries who are the best at what they do, right? So I kind of went through a period of kind of almost remolding, and it was like, well, hang on, they've tracked me right through from a 18, 19-year-old. I'm now 20, 21. I've gone from nothing to I'm about to go into an Olympic program, you know, 25 hours of training a week plus 25 hours of recovery, 7 days a week. Wow. We can get into that if you want. How am I going to cope with that, you know, also whilst doing a kind of medical degree? And so I went through a good sort of 4 months of rehab. I think a guy called Darren Whiter, who's a really celebrated coach. He won the Olympics in Beijing. He gave me a kind of program on the bike. And I had a physio called Julia Heddy of Judy Church. She's, amazing. She kind of rehabbed my rib and made me very kind of stable, serratus anterior function, made sure that was very good. I spent hours and hours on the Pilates reformer, just got bulletproof. And then 4 months after that, I pulled 5:51 on a 2K as a 21-year-old, and everyone was like, who the hell's this guy? And that for me, that kind of almost like rebirth from a kind of young adolescent that was just kind of almost in kind of gear 4, at the top of gear 4 going, just gave myself gear 5 and gear 6 by rehabbing and making my body much stronger. Wow. And then I got invited into the Olympic team and kind of progressed.
How was that?
How was the Olympic team?
Yeah, being invited, representing your country, was it everything you wanted it to be, or was you just so goal focused that it was just like, I knew this was going to happen, part of the process?
No, it was great, and I guess it's probably the biggest kind of shaping of my life, in the sense that I'm in danger. I'm continuously in danger of moving goalposts. So before I started rowing, I just wanted to get good at rowing. And then as soon as I kind of got okay at rowing, I was like, I quite like to row for the University of London. And then I was like, I'm doing that. I quite like to win Henley. I did that. And all of a sudden it kind of spiraled. And by the time I was getting invited into the team, it was like, well, I want to win the Olympics. We're looking back at it now, it's, you know, sort of going from never knowing what rowing is to like 2 years later thinking I've got to win the Olympics or I'm a failure. Just, it's an odd mindset to have. So I had some of the best of times, you know, winning world championship medals on the big stage. You know, in 2010, 2011, we got silver medals at the world championships, which still remains, you know, my best rowing achievements. Really enjoyed winning those with those group of guys.
So how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 32 now.
So 32.
Yeah. And then I did the London 2012 Olympics, and sadly, just in that year, I had a bumpy year. That rib came back. And so I missed out on Olympic trials then, and I couldn't put in the performance that I wanted to get in the 8. So for the games, I was selected into the team, which was great. But I was in that spare pairs slot, so I was basically kind of on the subs bench for the 8. So I was still there with the team. We did our race kind of, you know, the day before the heats, which was fun. It was great, nice to race, and it was great to be a part of the team. Great to then go into the village in the second week and kind of, you know, we're doing the Olympics. It's amazing. And so for me, it was just a lovely kind of, it was kind of closure for me, I guess, being in my kind of home capital, London, the parades through London with all the floats. And it sort of represented this kind of weird detour, where as an 18-year-old, I went to medical school literally 2 blocks from Trafalgar Square, well, maybe a bit more, 10 blocks from Trafalgar Square. And I sort of finished that 4-year journey, parading through the streets of London to Trafalgar Square. And I remember asking for permission from medical lecturers, like, can I have the afternoon off? I've got to go and parade around London. And So went back to medical school, finished off the degree, and
so you went back. Was you still doing it?
Yeah. So I got to a stage about 2 years out from the games where I had to pause my medical studies.
So you paused it?
Yeah. I went part-time for a year, was it a year or two, where I was doing very, very small amounts of medicine.
I don't want to know money or anything, but how does the Olympics work when you represent Great Britain?
It's a good question.
Do you get bursaries?
It's a good question. So if you it's an all or nothing game. So you have to, it's a kind of a bit of a catch-22. You've got to be in the team to be able to justify that you should be funded. Okay. And so there is a national funding program for our Olympic athletes. So that's ring-fenced money that's largely funded by the lottery, the national lottery. There's a small amount of government money there, but it's mainly lottery funding. So, you know, everyone's paying their Euro Millions, or maybe not, but, you know, the national lottery funds that. I would say, probably akin to about a graduate salary if you're winning world championship medals. When I started out, or if you're sort of not winning world championship medals, it's like a few £100 a month, maybe, which doesn't even cover rent if you're in London. So you really kind of do it as a bit of a vocation. And so some people sign up for an Olympiad, some people sign up for 2 Olympiads. And I know I had some friends who'd like 2-3 Olympiads and just didn't quite make it. And so it really is because you want to win the Olympics, and that becomes your big goal. So it's definitely not a profession or a sport that people go into chasing fancy cars and blingy watches.
So the Olympics 2012.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was amazing. I've got no reference point, I guess, as an athlete, because it's the only Olympics I did. It was a kind of bittersweet moment for me because
2012. How old was you?
God, how old was I in 2012? Well, I was born in '87, so that makes me 25. Yeah, 25. So so I was 25 in London 2012.
25.
Yeah. So I was relatively young compared to some of my peers, but there's a chap called Stan Laludis who I think he was 20 in London, so he's really, really young. And then he went on to win in Rio, so he was 24, only won. So we've had some young people win good medals. But also, so my pairs partner for that Olympiad basically was a guy called Greg Searle. He was 40 in London, so there's a kind of big spread of ages. Yeah, his story is amazing. So he won the Olympics, I think, as a 20-ish year old in '92. And then did a few Olympics, took 10 years out, and then wanted to come back to chase his dreams of winning that other gold medal. So anyway, that's a bit of a detour. But it was amazing for me because it was in my capital, like where I was studying, where I was living. And it was just a massive celebration about being British. And
was there a good vibe around it though? Because I think if I go to Olympics, I want to go to Brazil or something.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I didn't go to Rio, not even as a spectator. Everyone said that Rio was amazing in terms of the games. It was some iconic locations. The Lagoa, where they rode, was amazing. The parties were great in the second week. So rowing's in the first week, and then so means that we're quite lucky that the second week we can go and enjoy watching events and partying. It was unsafe compared to London, I think. I heard a few scary stories, which I won't repeat here. People having to go out on 2s and 3s.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But they had a different experience out there. I just thought it was fantastic the way that Lowcog and the people behind the London Olympics just ran it. I couldn't fault it, really, at any level. Slightly biased perspective as an athlete, but it was just amazing. I've got those are my closing ceremony shoes actually up on the wall, which is the white shoes. I just got everyone at the closing ceremony just going around and sign it. But I've got a little plaque on there which just says we did it right, and that was kind of from Lord Coe's speech, where he's like, when we look back on these 2 weeks, we can be proud to say we did it right, and I really feel like we did at every level, even from the kind of the volunteers and the games makers. It was just a real celebration, I think, of sport, but also of just kind of being Londoners and being British. And I thought it was a fantastic time. I don't know if everyone remembers, but we were quite nervous because building up to the Olympics in London, there was a lot of chat about, it's going to cost £8 billion and like, it's going to be crap. We're British, we're going to lose. And then we won the first medal, which I think was I think it was one of the cyclists, the road cyclists, I think Olympic silver. And then of course we had Helen and Heather win on, I think it was the Saturday, which was kind of the Super Saturday. And then we had like Super Sunday and then just a super bloody 2 weeks. And we had, if you take Rio away, our most successful Olympics ever at London. And that kind of legacy was...
Is it Jessica Ennis?
Yeah, Jessica Ennis, Greg Rutherford, Mo Farah, I think the men's 4, women's pair. Yeah, I think it was 5 or 6 gold medals, maybe it was 5 gold medals on that Saturday. And that was amazing, to see that kind of legacy being born, because obviously, 6 years out, you kind of know that London's going to be there. That was probably a little factor in my mind as well, being like, the London Olympics, it's a little seed planted. But then seeing us better that performance at Rio was fantastic, because you can just see that the growth in Olympic sport is in fact, I think it's the only time, I think, off the top of my head, that a host nation, normally if you look at Olympic performance, the host nation, so Sydney, the Australian Olympic team peaks, and then they come back down to their kind of normal performance. Beijing, China peaks, and they come back down. London, we kind of peaked, and then Rio, we had a better performance, which I think is the first time that's ever been done. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Tokyo.
So tell us, how did the races go, 2012?
It was great. I mean, so my race, I raced in the spare pairs race before the heat started. Yeah. So I basically got that done. We won that, which was fun. The races were great. There was a real mixed bag of results. So the women and lightweights did fantastic. They won a number of gold medals. I think they had 2 gold medals and 2 silver medals, which was amazing. The heavyweight men did well. I think we got a bronze medal in the single scull from Alan Campbell. We got a bronze medal in the men's pair, which is amazing, and a bronze medal in the men's 8, which at the time I think the group of guys were quite disappointed with. But I think looking back, they realised like what a great achievement that was.
Definitely.
And then obviously the men's 4, which was it's become a bit of a British blue ribbon event. They won that. So I think overall that we were the top Olympic nation for rowing. And yeah, it was a kind of real party atmosphere, I guess.
So let's. Why have you retired from rowing? If you had a partner who was 40 and you're only 32,
yeah, good question.
And physically, anyway, from what I see, and obviously what you do anyway, you're a beast as well. So why did you retire from rowing?
I mean, for a few things. The first is I had a difficult experience in that year. So I didn't win an Olympic medal. I didn't get in the boat I wanted to get into, which was the 8. We didn't win the Olympics. It was great to be there in a party atmosphere, and I loved it, but I didn't quite achieve what I wanted
disappointed?
to. Oh yeah, I was definitely disappointed.
How did that affect you?
Well, I guess in the only way I knew how, which was kind of just moving forward. And I was at a stage with my medical career where I still had, I think, 2 or 3 years left to finish. Because I remember that at the beginning, 6 years, right? So I still had a couple of years to finish. And I just didn't really want to not be a doctor and just, have this degree hanging over me that I think I would have always regretted had I not gone back and finished my medical degree and pursued that career. I could have stayed on to Rio, but it would have meant costing my medical career, because I think I would have had to have probably started again if I took like 4 years out, right? So I finished my medical degree, and to be honest, I didn't really miss lots of the rowing. I missed the start line, I missed the racing, but I didn't really miss the 25 hours a week of sitting on the rowing machine. And at the same time as my medical degree, I'd started this thing called RowingWOD, and I'd started being in the fitness industry, and I was doing CrossFit, and I was doing all these kind of fun things, and I really just didn't miss it. And so that was the kind of compass for me that I felt like I kind of almost, it felt right for me not to go back to rowing.
Have you got closure with rowing? So say not winning a medal and stuff in 2012, would you say you got closure, or would you say it still bugs you today? Because it's not that long ago, let's be honest.
No, it's not.
It's not that long ago.
You're right. I mean,
be honest.
I think no is probably the honest answer. I don't look back on my rowing career and think I've achieved all I wanted to achieve with it, because I wanted to win the Olympics. But also, I'm not sure, and where I am in my life is I'm content at the moment doing the things that I'm doing. I know, and I've had friends who've gone on to win the Olympics, who've just missed out several times. I've had people who've come back from retirement or what have you at different points in their career, like 10 years away, 1 year away.
Are you saying you're coming back?
No. I'm not saying that. But what I'm trying to
breaking news. He's coming back.
What I'm trying to demonstrate is that it's always a thought that retired athletes have, is like whenever you see the Olympic racing, you're like, oh, that's amazing, I want to go back. But there's a cost to that, right?
Huge cost.
Yeah, and similar to what I was talking about before with the kind of the hustle culture and the cost to that, the cost to winning, the price of winning Olympic medals is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of training and recovery, and the things you miss out on, the parties away, seeing friends, going on holidays. And for me, I got a young son, 18 months old. I don't really want to say, no, we can't go on that holiday. Yeah. And that's where I am in my life. So looking back, I'm very, very happy and content that I gave it everything and I gave my best. I didn't achieve what I ended up wanting to achieve right at the end. But if you'd have told me as an 18-year-old, mate, if you try this rowing thing, you'll be going and parading through the streets of London and being an Olympic rower after going to London 2012. I'd have bitten your hand off, right? And so it's a big lesson for me, kind of like moving goalposts. And it's something that I do naturally that I'm very aware of.
So back to medical school.
Yeah.
How was your final 2-3 years, do you say?
Yeah, it was great. So I think it's a natural thing I do, which is that whenever there's a slight amount of time back in my life, I sort of fill it quite quickly. So all of a sudden I wasn't doing 25 hours a week of training. I was like, oh, what else do I do? So I started to dabble in the world of entrepreneurialism or entrepreneurship. I started a company called Decepra, which was a kind of it was standard for disque secare praecise, or whatever. Anyway, it was to learn to cut precisely.
So you still at medical school?
I was still at medical school, yeah, and entered into this thing called the London Entrepreneurs Challenge, and we won that. So we got £5,000 worth of seed funding to create a training organisation that taught surgeons how to perform keyhole surgery using virtual reality.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool. So that was a fun little like side hustle that I did for a bit. It didn't really go anywhere because, in fact, I realized that the business we created wasn't necessary. They could just kind of go straight B2B. So I did that. And I just started to see that there was a lot happening in the world of fitness. And I was falling in love with a thing called CrossFit, a thing founded by Greg Glassman. And I love picking up these new sort of skills. So learning how to walk on my hands, doing like muscle ups, climbing.
What about the culture though?
The culture. Well, I actually really liked it. So
because CrossFit got crucified and it became everyone just hated on it.
Did it?
To begin, like I felt like people just like, if people do CrossFit, everyone says, they let you know they do CrossFit. But I'm thinking it's a positive movement, man. Like how it doesn't matter what the people are like. If it's getting people into exercise, getting into people living healthy, and there's a positive culture where they want to go to the gym instead of just being in the mirror doing deadlifts and looking at everyone angrily. And
so my opinion is that I think Greg Glassman has changed the fitness industry for the better forever.
100%.
And I think what he's fundamentally done is shifted the focus from aesthetics to performance. I grew up, and there's a book there, Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilding as a young. I was like, I want to be massive and strong, and like having all those metaphors. And we've seen on social media the women. I'm a fitness pro. Are you? But all your posts are of your butt in these leggings. There's quite a huge aesthetic focus to the fitness industry. I think, particularly
and Photoshop
15 years ago. And from me as an athlete, but also as a budding doctor, I thought this is valuable. Getting people off the couch and moving their bodies, fueling their bodies correctly. I was like, this is massively valuable for healthcare, let alone fitness. But from a performance point of view, I was like, well, this is amazing. No longer are we thinking, the questions aren't like, double bicep pose, or how much can you bench? It's like, what's your Fran time? What's Fran? Or it's like doing these like pull-ups and thrusts, and you're like, this is quite cool. And I loved it because it was bloody hard. So I had a specific skill set as a rower, which was, posterior chain driven movements, triple extension, anything that looked a bit like rowing, basically, I was pretty good at. And anything that wasn't, I sucked at. And as I demonstrated to you before, I don't like being wrong. I don't like being not so good at things. And I just had this journey of learning new movements, getting fitter by CrossFit's definition of being able to do more stuff. And I just thought it was a fantastic community that, they welcomed me in with both arms because of my unique knowledge that I was now, okay at doing CrossFit.
And rowing's quite.
And I knew the sport. Exactly. The rowing machine featured quite heavily when I started in about 2013, 2014. And so I was very fortunate to go around speaking to lots of different CrossFitters and working with elite CrossFitters, teaching them how to row basically, and how to row a bit more effectively so that they get more out of the machine. And that's basically where RowingWOD was born from, which was trying to create a structured and scientific program that allowed people that were interested in fitness, main skew to CrossFitters, to get better on the machine so they could get faster, yes, but also they could get fitter and then have this kind of movement journey about learning how to move correctly, just like I had from learning how to do gymnastics or weightlifting. And I thought it was really important for us as a sport in rowing to be able to shine the light on how good and how valuable this movement is for the human body. So that's kind of where it started, and it's sort of run from there, basically. Good.
Is that something you...
All
right. We'll just, can we cut that? Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Cool.
I was just making sure. I was like, is there only 1 minute left on the battery or something?
All good.
Okay, good. Okay, so would you say you're particularly passionate about medicine still? Is that something you're... Because let's be honest, going into uni and doing something for 6-7 years, and it's an ongoing process of learning, that is difficult.
Yeah, it is.
To that level.
Yeah.
What drives you for that? So take away rowing, take away fitness. Let's focus a little bit on medicine. Let's focus on becoming a doctor.
Sure.
Why was that important to you?
I think it's always been important to me, and without sounding a bit too cheesy, to help others and making them happier and healthier. I loved science and I loved problem solving, as you've kind of heard. And so for me, medicine seemed like a really cool career to be able to do that. I think my idea of hell would be like working in an office, crunching numbers all the time. And I like working with different people, and I've loved working with teams, and I just sort of saw medicine as a pretty cool thing to be able to do, and also kind of for me as a kind of valuable skill set. I thought, you know, what's more valuable than knowing how to save someone's life? I was like, that's pretty bloody cool, right?
That is.
And so I spent all that time studying, and I still continuously am learning and practicing medicine. I think it's a real privilege, but it's also a bit of a difficult time. I'm not sure if you know about what's happening in medicine, where, you know, the chronic underfunding of the health service for a number of years. When I had my first year as a practicing doctor, there was junior doctor strikes all over the country because the government were trying to force, and they have continued to force, this contract on junior doctors. So there's quite a big time going on for medicine where no one really knows what's going to happen. The people who are quite clever within the industry are thinking, this may not survive 10 years. Genuinely, it may not survive as we know it. We're talking about even the leaders' debate of Corbyn versus Johnson. You heard them saying that, you know, Labour are preaching that the Tories are going to sell off the NHS to America. There's a lot of big seismic shifts going on in medicine. And so
much uncertainty.
Well, and so for me as an individual looking after my family, I realised that actually I needed to be able to support my family if medicine changed seismically, and I was caught out. So for me, that's why I've diversified. So I've got a business that can support my family if I need to. I've got a skill set that can also support myself, you know, potentially as a speaker or consulting on startups and things like that. And I'm always very interested in new things and side projects. So I saw that as de-risking myself as a doctor. I saw too many of my friends being, you know, registrar or consultant level, tethered to a salary, tethered to a paycheck, tethered to a hospital. And I was like, well, what happens if the government just forces a 20% pay cut on you? Or what happens if they say you have to do this and impose that? I was like, that seems quite risky to me. So in 2015, that was where I needed to make a bit of a kind of change. So I still work as a doctor, and I still love working as a doctor most of the time. What frustrates me is when what I would call the clunkiness of the system, and doctors listening to this or people in the healthcare profession will know what I mean by that. And I think that needs to be changed. But at the heart of it, I still love what the NHS stands for, which is that it's free at the point of access. And what that means is that if you fall down on the street, if you get cancer, if your baby is in trouble, the government, the health service, will pick you up because you're a British citizen, and it will sort you out.
The NHS is incredible. You always get people who moan about the NHS. You always go into, aren't you? Yeah. But the fact is, when something is serious, it is.
But it also costs, right? So, I mean, it's the annual spend of the NHS. This is not investment, right? This is just to keep the lights on. That's 120 billion pounds.
Oh my!
It's 120,000 million pounds every year just to keep the lights on, and it's growing every year.
I can imagine.
How many people do you reckon the NHS employs? Any ideas?
Off the top of my head, I'm probably gonna sound 50,000 people.
That's what I used to think as well. 1.5 million people are employed by the NHS. It's the fifth biggest employer worldwide, right? After like McDonald's and Walmart and places like that.
The fifth
globally, biggest employer of people. So you think, well, hang on, this is a massive, massive resource. This is a massive asset that we have. You know, and like I jumped on a box and cut my leg open in the States, and it cost $2,000. You know, to get it sewn up. You know, I've had friends that have been, you know, they've gone over and had emergency surgery, and thankfully they've had insurance, but those are like $50,000 bills. Mate. I mean, what we have in the NHS is globally unique, and it's something that we need to protect. But understand that also it's incredibly difficult for the workers that are working in it because of the chronic underfunding for a number of years. But it's something that we need to fight for. And it's one of those things, right, where if I think the phrase is something like, if good people stand by and do nothing for too long, before long it will be gone. And I think it's what we're seeing now is that we need more and more people, more and more good people. I mean, much clever and much smarter than I am, and much more kind of within the industry to figure that out. And so one of the really good things, I guess, whilst we're on the topic is, so this is my second year of being what's called an NHS clinical entrepreneur. So the guy called Professor Tony Young, who's head of, I think he's the clinical lead for innovation in the NHS. And he started a program called the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Program because he realized that there was a lot of great people leaving medicine because of the clunkiness in the system, because of this risk that I'd spotted, like, well, I'm not sure if I want to be here in 10 years. And he said, well, let's find all these doctors that are doing amazing things outside of medicine as well as inside of medicine. Let's find all of these amazing clinicians, pharmacists, physios, healthcare professionals that have spotted ways in which this system is a bit clunky and have refined it. And let's round them up into a group called the clinical entrepreneurs. And so I'm a clinical entrepreneur, and I continue to be one. For me, RowingWOD's a bit of a fitness venture, but it's also got a health component to it where we can get you, fitter and healthier, total body time efficient movement, etc. But there's amazing clinical entrepreneurs that are doing things like the company called Touch Surgery, which is like the Google Maps of your body. So rather than going and like practicing on bodies straight away as step one and potentially making a mistake, cutting an artery and killing someone, sort of a big example, but it's a digital representation of the body, so you can go and learn the blueprint, do the journey before you go into theatre. Wow. That's an example. There's a chap called Dr. Rupi, I can't remember Rupi's last name, Ajua, I can't even pronounce it. Yeah, he's got an account called The Doctor's Kitchen, and he's a massive advocate for nutritional medicine, I think he would call it, which is that how we fuel our bodies is incredibly important, and it can actually have profound health benefits. So I think there's a lot of good people in the NHS working hard day to day, providing for their families and providing for their patients and making sure that patient safety is adhered to and championed. But there's also fantastic innovators, and I think that we need more and more of this to help really look after this massive asset that we have as a country.
Let's talk a little bit about your success, or whether you see it as any type of success, but how do you execute on such a high level on a daily basis, not just in your job, but in because tell me if I'm wrong, but when I look at you, you've got your shit together, man. Family, your own business, your job as well, your own personal health. Yeah. You seem like it's a juggling act, but you're balancing everything, which looks amazing. Obviously, that doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. But how do you execute on every single level at such a high standard? It doesn't matter whether it's 100% every single day, but still, if you're operating between 70 and 100% on a consistent basis, that's impressive.
I mean, I guess the honest answer is I don't execute. I don't think that I have the day that you think I probably have. I don't wake up at 5 and have a 10-minute meditation practice and then go and do my top 10 optimal tasks. And like my day doesn't look like a highlight reel of the most successful people in the world. I guess I'm pretty normal. I like to think I'm pretty normal in that I get joy out of the simple pleasures in life. I like working out. I like eating good food. I like spending time with my family, and I like feeling secure. And for me, security, I kind of almost dial it down to 3 things, which is if I can do meaningful work, have meaningful relationships, and be financially free, I'm pretty content. And so it's a continuous process for me. I'm 32 now. I've worked hard all of my life that I can remember, and it's only really in the last couple years that I've tried to work a lot smarter. So I've definitely done my time in the sense of waking up early and trying to do that kind of hustle culture. But I mean, a typical day, for instance, today I'm not in medicine, I'm doing all the different things that I need to do in the week. So I'm preparing for a seminar that I'm doing on Sunday. This morning I walked the dog like a normal dad or normal sort of family member. Saw my son in the morning. We had a normal breakfast together with my wife. We're doing this as a kind of thing that popped up. We've had it in the diary for a couple of weeks. I've got some meetings later on. I'm going to do some emails. I'm going to get through a chunk of work. I'll do a little bit of learning, maybe listen to another podcast or something like that. It's pretty routine, but what I took away from my time as an athlete is that, that phrase that Jürgen said, there are no shortcuts. It's just about showing up and consistently doing it. And so the biggest thing I took away, I guess, from London is when I was speaking to other athletes. I was very, very, I guess, out there as a 25-year-old. I had no qualms about going up to sort of Mo Farah or Michael Phelps and just trying to have a chat. Those 2 specific examples didn't quite work. They just sort of said, "Oh, can we have a photo? Great, see you later." But speaking to people who, these amazing sprint cyclists that have massive legs and like bloody powerful, small little like distance runners, people who are at the top of the game of what they do, I realized pretty quickly that these acts of greatness that we witness, so just what you sort of saying to me, like you see this person that's really successful, which is great. I don't massively feel successful at the moment, but it's not built upon a single act. It's just they've decided to show up day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, and getting just like kind of maybe 1% better. Wow. And there's a lovely little graph that circled around, and like James Clear is an author, written, I think, Atomic Habits.
The American
Yeah, he's an American chap.
Yeah.
There's another American guy called Ben Bergeron who coaches some elite CrossFitters. It's a nice graphic which just kind of shows what happens if you accumulate or compound 1% per day, and you go for like 10 years. You end up at like 4, 5, 600%, maybe more, better. Yeah. And it's just showing up every day and just trying to practice more often doing the things right than not, because it's so easy just to sort of say, oh, I'll just watch that like Netflix episode, or like I'll just have another cake or what have you.
It's so easy to.
It is easy, but the cost, again, the price you pay for that is that you'll wake up in 10 years' time and potentially regret the things that you didn't do.
People, as we talk about, people value comfort over valuing growth.
Yeah, but it's natural. It's biologically ingrained, right? You have your dopaminergic pathways which release dopamine. So you hit a bit of sugar, a bit of fat, you get an instant satisfaction. So that delayed gratification is a real kind of killer, because it's so hard to figure out that if you just put yourself in a little bit of discomfort now that has meaning to it. I'm not saying like, stab yourself in the arm or what have you, or like, put some fire in, like, don't just make yourself uncomfortable for the sake of it. But if you try and pursue something that will, the attached price to that is discomfort now, it will more likely than not have payoff later down the line.
So would you say you're in a bit of where you've paid off some of your hard work you've done, say over the last, you're 32 now, say over the last 10 years, right? So now I come here, you got a beautiful house, you got your family. Would you say you're at a time now you cannot relax, because you're not relaxing, because you're working still very hard, but you're more in control of your time than actually time in control of you?
Good question. My wife and I think, so we've been together since I was 18, so it's been a long time. Yeah, we've been married for 6 years, and we've been together now for what, 15?
Wow, you've 14? Really grown together.
Well, yeah, but we've been very good, I think, is continuing to work on our relationship, but also work on our lifestyle. So we've tried to engineer our lives, right? So we think a lot about what our weeks look like and what our days look like. We don't really think about like where we want to be in 5 years or where we want to be in 3 years.
Got you.
But we try and change about
consistency again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like, well, what does Friday look like? What does this week look like? And we're sort of thinking, well, what is Christmas going to look like? That's sort of 6 weeks away. Like, what do I actually want to get out of that phase? We're definitely not perfect, and we always have our disagreements, and things don't work all the time. But we are constantly trying to figure out what that week looks like. So I think I've got to a place now where I would say I'm content, but I'm not pleased with how my week looks like. I think there's a few more things that I'd like to.
So do you set goals?
No, I don't anymore. I used to.
That's interesting.
I used to. I stopped doing New Year's resolutions about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Just because I would achieve them and then not feel as much satisfaction from them as I thought I would. I might go and try and set goals again in the future.
Or do you set goals in your head without even putting them down? So as you said, your goalposts move. So probably in your head, you've still got.
So I think one of the big things I've done in the last year that's much better is, I've got a coach that I work with to kind of reflect back to me, like hold a mirror up to what I'm doing. So that's something I'm much more aware of. The goals that I set now are less material. And material, I don't mean like buying a car or something like that. I mean, for me, getting a degree, getting an Olympic medal, those are quite tangible, finite goals. And they're quite easy to kind of plot back from. I have things that I want to do. So, I have certain training, I guess you'd call them training goals that I want to get to, but it's not like I want to hit this number. Do
you want to compete at CrossFit?
I mean, I enjoy competing at CrossFit, and I have enjoyed competing at CrossFit in the past. I like doing that when I'm fit. And so one of the things that's taken a back seat for me in the last sort of probably year since, figuring out family life is my fitness. I'm definitely less fit than I used to be. So now for me, definitely fitness is, I want to improve my fitness because I've always seen a positive compounding with that in my life. So that's something I'm going to get back to. Professionally for me, I'm not quite where I want to be. I do many things where I really want to kind of focus on doing, I think, one thing really well that touches on many things. So I was still learning lots as I guess the other thing to reflect back to is that, since the Olympics and since qualifying as a doctor, I've only really been in the world of work for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. So if you think that back to as a kind of someone coming out of school, that's like a 22, 23-year-old, or someone finishing a 3-year degree, that's like a 25, 26-year-old. So at 32, I still feel pretty hungry for the professional world and learning how the world works and coming out of this kind of bubble as an athlete and bubble as a medic. So I still feel like there's a lot that I want to learn. There's a lot of more people I want to meet. I want to learn how different businesses work, how different industries work. So I'm quite interested. But I think for me to, heading to, I guess, the journey of being 40, which is God forbid, in like 8 years' time, I'm kind of using these next 8 years as really making sure that I protect and have boundaries around my family life, but also have a real compounding, like an upwards compounding journey for my professional skills, and to try to understand how I can really add value into the world. And a kind of consequence of that is that hopefully I can capture some of that and live a comfortable life as well.
Definitely. So I ask every guest this: if you could sit down with any 3 people, dead or alive, successful, whatever, what 3 people would it be? Dead or literally anyone. Could be anyone.
God, dead or alive. So a book I've sort of read for a long time. So there's a chap called Ray Dalio. You won't know.
I've seen. He's just done a podcast with that Valuetainment guy. Have you seen that one?
No, he's written a book called Principles. Bridgewater Capital. So I think he looks things through a very one-sided, a sort of very finite lens of value chain.
He's like the 52 richest man in the world, I think. Something like
that. He's very wealthy, but that's not the reason I like it. I like his mind. So the way he's sort of dissected his life and the way he's continuously improved his processes, he'd be quite an interesting person to chat to. He's alive.
Watch the podcast. There's a podcast literally just it's pretty the last month.
Amazing.
And you watch it, and what he's talking about is exactly what you just said. Half of it, I'm like, what is he even talking about? For me, it's just like, once again, processing it.
I think I'd like to also probably get in a room The Rock, Dwayne Johnson.
Definitely.
And the reason for that is that I'd like to know if what I see from social media is real. But he's also, obviously, from my lens, quite successful in a number of different industries. And I'd be really interested to kind of see and tease apart the kind of lessons from that. Third person, I quite like listening to... Maybe 3rd/4th. So I'm going to expand it. So Ricky Gervais, I really enjoy his humour and I like his mind and the way he thinks about things. I mean, he's a philosophy grad, and underneath the kind of silliness of what he does is actually some kind of deeper, quite cool messages. So I'd quite like to kind of almost spend a few hours just talking to him, taking away the kind of layers of humour, if you like, and kind of really feeling what he kind of dialed into in his life and what's important to him. And there was someone else that I just thought of that it's escaped my mind, but we only need 3, so that's all good. Fine, that's him.
But I feel like there's
that's the other chap. So Christopher Hitchens is a former living chap who died of I think it was esophageal cancer. He's a sort of a very outspoken atheist.
Okay.
I'd never always agreed with how he would say things, but I just think had a really sharp mind. So he's passed away. It'd be quite cool to have sort of resurrect his brain and his persona, just to kind of understand where he was coming from with those sorts of narratives. He's what I would call a militant atheist. Don't really agree with that necessarily. I'm not religious myself.
You don't have to agree with different. Sometimes you just appreciate the way they communicate, the way they do things, or you don't have to agree or believe everything they say just to be a fan or to support.
I guess the 5th one as well is Sarah Blakely. She's the
He's extended it to 5.
She's the founder of Spanx. She's got a thing. There's a business called Masterclass, which kind of world experts teaching how they do. She's a really interesting person that I don't know much about, other than the success story of her business. So I've turned 3 to 5. Yeah, and I felt like I needed to get a woman in there because I had three chaps. So yeah, Sarah Blakely.
Perfect. I just want to say a massive thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
The more we shoot, hopefully we'll come back for a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, perfect.
But just honestly, what you're doing is absolutely incredible.
Thanks, mate.
It's inspiring, I think, even probably for us to come and see what you're doing.
Great.
It kind of forces us to kind of step up and elevate as well, because it's so easy to get stuck in a rut of everyone around you. You're doing more than most of the people around you. And sometimes, as you say, it's not just about doing more, it's just about working a bit smarter and actually having maybe a bit of a better game plan, or having a bit more structure.
Yeah, or understanding what's real for you, what makes you feel fulfilled, what gives you meaningful work, meaningful relationships, what could give you financial freedom, and then just not being afraid to just go after that. And you don't need to apologize to anyone. You don't need to be delving into like work hard. Just be honest and pursue that journey, and good things will probably happen.
So that's it, guys. Work hard, really hard. But anyway, guys, there's another episode. What we would do, we'll put all the information for Cameron, this Cameron, not this Cameron, in the description box. you know what to do. Make sure you follow, you like, you comment, and share as well. Once again, that's another episode of the Dreams to Reality podcast. And until next time, peace.